I bought my daughter an apartment as a wedding gift. I paid for the venue, the flowers, the dress, because that's what mothers do, isn't it? We give everything we have to see our children happy, to watch them build lives we could only dream of. And when you become a mother, they tell you that the greatest joy in life is watching your child grow, watching them find their happiness. For most of my life, I believed that with every fiber of my being, I raised Caroline with everything I had. Every sacrifice I made, every sleepless night, every penny I saved, it was all for her. To see her smile, to see her succeed, to see her become the woman I always knew she could be. So when she called me that Tuesday afternoon to tell me about her wedding plans, I should have been over the moon, my little girl, all grown up, ready to walk down the aisle. I pressed the phone to my ear, already imagining the beautiful ceremony, the joy on her face, the tears I would cry as I watched her say those sacred vows. "Mom, we've finally picked the venue." Caroline's voice bubbled with excitement through the speaker. "It's going to be absolutely magical, a luxury experience, you know? Everything needs to be perfect." I smiled, settling into my favorite armchair by the window. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. I can't wait to see it." She went on about the marble floors, the crystal fixtures, the designer everything. And I listened, genuinely happy that she had found someone who made her feel this way. Charles seemed like a decent man. A bit too polished for my taste, perhaps, but if he made my daughter happy, that was all that mattered. But then, just as I was about to ask about the guest list, Caroline said something that made my heart stop. "By the way, Mom, I'm going to need you to come to the wedding alone." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "What do you mean, dear?" "Oh, you know," she said, her tone suddenly casual, dismissive even. "Don't bring any of your friends, especially not that old friend Marjorie. She doesn't really fit the luxury theme of the wedding." Before we go any further, I have to pause here. If you're listening to this story, I want you to do me a favor. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. And if you're enjoying this so far, please hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because trust me, what happens next is something you won't want to miss. Now, where was I? Oh yes, that phone call. I sat there, gripping the phone, trying to process what I had just heard. "Caroline, I don't understand. Marjorie has known you since you were a baby. She's like family. Mom, just leave the old people at home, okay?" Her voice had that edge to it now, that tone she used when she was annoyed. "I want everything to be perfect. You understand, don't you? Old people." She said it so casually, like she was talking about outdated furniture or yesterday's trash, not about people who had loved her, supported her, celebrated every milestone of her life. Not about me. Because let's be honest, when she said old people, she wasn't just talking about Marjorie. She was talking about me too, her mother, the woman who had given up so much so that she could have everything. I felt something crack inside my chest, something that had been holding on for dear life. All those years of putting her first, of working extra shifts so she could have the best education, of missing vacations and new clothes and small luxuries so she could have what she wanted. All of it flashed before my eyes in that moment. "Mom, are you still there?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm here." "So we're good then? You'll come alone?" I could have said something. I could have told her how much her words hurt, how they cut through me like glass. I could have demanded an explanation, demanded respect, demanded to be seen as more than just an embarrassment to her perfect day. But I didn't. Instead, I did what I had done for years. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it, and I said, "Of course, dear. I'll be there." "Great. Love you, Mom. Gotta run. So much to plan." And just like that, she was gone. The line went dead, leaving me sitting in my armchair, staring at the phone in my hand. The afternoon light filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. Everything looked the same as it had 10 minutes ago, but something fundamental had shifted. Something I couldn't quite name yet. I set the phone down slowly and looked around my quiet home, this house that had seen Caroline grow from a baby to a woman. These walls that held so many memories of birthday parties and homework sessions and late-night talks about boys and dreams and the future. And in that moment, sitting alone in the fading light, I realized something important. I had spent my entire life making myself smaller so she could be bigger, and she had never even noticed. The wedding was in 3 weeks. 3 weeks to decide what kind of mother I was going to be. The kind who smiled and accepted disrespect? Or the kind who finally, after all these years, stood up for herself? I sat there for a long time, thinking, planning, wondering what I was going to do about the daughter who had just told me I wasn't good enough for her perfect day. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and memories came flooding back like an old film reel playing in my mind. Memories I hadn't allowed myself to revisit in years. I remembered Caroline at 6 years old, running through this very house with her hair in pigtails, laughing as she chased butterflies in the backyard. Back then, I was everything to her. Her hero, her protector, the person she ran to when the world felt too big and scary. When did that change? I got up and walked to my study, pulling out the old photo albums I kept on the bottom shelf. There she was, in her college graduation gown, beaming at the camera. I had worked 3 jobs that year to keep her in school. 3 jobs: the diner in the morning, cleaning offices in the afternoon, and weekend shifts at the grocery store. My body had screamed for rest, but I kept going. Because that's what you do for your children. You push through the exhaustion, the aching muscles, the bone-deep tiredness that settles into your very soul. You do it because their dreams matter more than your comfort. Caroline had wanted to study at an expensive private university, not the state school that would have been perfectly fine and much more affordable. No, she wanted prestige. She wanted the name-brand education that would open doors. So I gave it to her. I turned the page and found a photo from her 21st birthday. She was surrounded by friends at some fancy restaurant downtown. I wasn't in the picture. I had been working that night, trying to pay off the credit card bill from her spring break trip to Europe. The trip she said everyone in her sorority was taking, and she couldn't possibly miss it. When had I become so invisible? I closed the album and walked to the kitchen, making myself a cup of tea. The house felt enormous in the quiet darkness. Too big for one person, too full of memories that now felt hollow. There had been signs, of course. Small things I had brushed away, convinced myself didn't matter. Like the time she brought Charles home to meet me for the first time. She had called ahead with specific instructions about what to serve, what to wear, how to present myself. Just keep it simple, Mom. Nothing too homey or old-fashioned. I had laughed it off then. Young people and their strange ideas about sophistication. Or the Christmas 2 years ago when she gave me a gift certificate to a spa, along with a pamphlet about age-appropriate fashion. She had smiled sweetly and said, "I just want you to feel confident. Mom, update your look a little." I had thanked her, pushed down the hurt, and told myself she was just trying to help. But now, sitting in my kitchen at 2 in the morning, I saw those moments for what they really were. Not concern, not love, but embarrassment. She was embarrassed by me, by my simple clothes and my simple life and my simple friends who didn't fit into the glossy world she was trying to build. The tea grew cold in my hands as I thought about all the times I had made excuses for her behavior, the canceled lunch dates because something more important came up, the phone calls that lasted 3 minutes, just long enough for her to ask for something, the visits that became less and less frequent until I was the one always driving to see her, never the other way around. I had told myself she was busy. Young people are always busy, always moving, always building their lives. It's natural. It's normal. But it wasn't normal to tell your mother not to bring her friends to your wedding. It wasn't normal to call people you've known your whole life old and not fitting. What had I done wrong? Had I loved her too much, given her too much, made life too easy so she never learned to appreciate struggle or sacrifice? My mind drifted back to a particular conversation we'd had about a year ago. I had mentioned that I was thinking of finally taking that trip to Italy I'd always dreamed about. Something for myself, after years of putting everyone else first. Caroline had been supportive, I thought. She'd said, "That's great, Mom. You should totally do that." But then, not 2 days later, she called asking if I could help with the down payment on a new car. Her old one was embarrassing and didn't match her professional image. The Italy trip never happened. The money went to the car. And did she ever thank me? Really thank me? Or had it just become expected that Mom would always be there, always ready to give, always willing to sacrifice her own happiness for whatever Caroline needed? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street bathed in moonlight. Somewhere out there, my daughter was sleeping soundly, probably dreaming of her perfect wedding day. Her luxury event where everything would be just right, where every person would fit her carefully curated image. And I would be there, alone, watching from the sidelines. An obligation, a checkbox on her list of things that had to be handled. Bring flowers, check. Book photographer, check. Invite Mom, but make sure she doesn't bring anyone embarrassing, check. When exactly had I stopped being a person to her and become just another detail to manage? The apartment. I thought about the beautiful apartment I had purchased for her as a wedding gift. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, in a safe neighborhood with good schools for the future grandchildren I hope to know. It had taken me 5 years to save for that down payment. 5 years of putting aside every spare dollar, of saying no to myself so I could say yes to her one more time. She didn't know about it yet. I was planning to surprise her after the ceremony, to hand her the keys and watch her face light up with joy, to finally see that look of pure gratitude, of understanding what her mother had done for her. But would she even appreciate it? Or would she just accept it as her due, another thing Mom was supposed to provide? Would she even say thank you? Or would she inspect it and find it lacking somehow, not quite matching the vision she had for her perfect life? I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window and felt something hardening inside me, something that had been soft and giving for too many years. 3 weeks until the wedding. 3 weeks to decide who I was going to be. The mother who kept giving until there was nothing left? Or someone else entirely? The night offered no answers, but as dawn began to break over the horizon, I felt something new stirring inside me, something that felt a lot like resolve. The next morning arrived with a phone call. Of course it did. Caroline needed something. "Mom, I'm sending you a link to the dress code for the wedding," she said without preamble. "No, good morning. No, how are you? Just straight to business. It's formal, obviously. Black tie. I need you to get something appropriate." I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, taking a breath. "I have several nice dresses, sweetheart." "I know, but this is really important. I need everyone to look cohesive. I'll text you some examples of what I'm thinking. Nothing too matronly, okay? Something elegant but understated. You don't want to draw attention away from the bride." Draw attention. As if I had ever been the type to seek the spotlight, as if showing up and existing wasn't already difficult enough now that she'd made it clear I was barely welcome. "I'll take care of it," I said. "Great. Oh, and one more thing. The videographer wants to do some family interviews. You know, parents talking about the couple, that sort of thing. But I was thinking maybe we skip that? It might be too emotional and I don't want the video to feel too sentimental. Charles and I want something modern and sleek. Too emotional. Too sentimental. Too much of a reminder that this wedding was supposed to be about family, not just aesthetics and image. Whatever you think is best," I heard myself say, and hated how small my voice sounded. After she hung up, I sat there holding my phone, feeling the weight of every conversation we'd had over the past few weeks, each one chipping away at whatever relationship we had left. But I went shopping anyway, because that's what I did. I always did what was expected. The boutique she'd recommended was intimidating. Sleek glass displays, impossibly thin mannequins, and price tags that made my stomach turn. A saleswoman approached with a practiced smile, looking me up and down in a way that made me feel about 2 inches tall. "I need something for my daughter's wedding," I told her. She pulled several dresses, each more expensive than the last. I tried them on, staring at myself in the mirror. When had I gotten so old? When had the lines around my eyes become so deep? When had my hands started to look like my mother's hands? I chose a simple navy dress, elegant, understated, invisible. Perfect. The apartment closing happened that same week. I signed the papers in a lawyer's office, transferring ownership of a property I would probably never see Caroline appreciate. The real estate agent congratulated me on such a generous gift. "Your daughter is very lucky," she said. Was she? Or was I just another person she'd learned to take advantage of? I picked up the keys and held them in my palm. Heavy, solid, proof of 5 years of sacrifice. I had planned to present them in a beautiful box, maybe with a handwritten letter explaining everything the apartment represented. All the love, all the hope, all the dreams I had for her future. Now the keys just felt like evidence of my own foolishness. That evening, Caroline called again, this time about the flowers, then the cake, then the seating chart. Each call was a list of demands disguised as requests. Each one reminded me that I was useful for my wallet and my willingness to comply, but not much else. "Oh, I almost forgot," she said during one call. "Can you handle the payment for the venue? It's due next week. I'll text you the amount." The amount, when it came through, made me dizzy. But I didn't argue. I just transferred the money and watched my savings account shrink. Afterward, I sat at my kitchen table and did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of wine, poured myself a glass, and really thought about what I was doing. I was funding my own humiliation, paying for a party where I wasn't truly wanted, buying love that should have been freely given. My friend Marjorie called that night. "How are the wedding plans coming?" she asked, her voice warm and familiar. I almost told her the truth, almost said, "She doesn't want you there. She doesn't want any of us there. We're too old, too simple, too real for her perfect fantasy day." But I couldn't do it. Couldn't bear to see the hurt on my friend's face, to admit out loud what my daughter really thought of the people who loved her. "They're coming along," I said instead. "It's going to be quite the event." "I can't wait," Marjorie said. "I remember when Caroline was born. Seems like yesterday you were showing me her first steps right there in your living room. Now she's getting married. Time really does fly." After we hung up, I sat in the silence and felt something shift inside me. Something that had been bending for a long time finally reached its breaking point. I thought about the wedding, the venue I'd paid for, the flowers I'd purchased, the dress Caroline would wear, which I'd also helped fund. All of it designed to create her perfect day, her perfect image. And somewhere in the middle of all that perfection, I would sit alone, a reminder of everything she wanted to leave behind. No. Something whispered in the back of my mind. No, that's not how this is going to go. I walked to my computer and started doing something I never thought I would do. Research, planning, thinking through possibilities I'd never allowed myself to consider. If Caroline wanted a perfect wedding, a flawless event where everything went according to her carefully planned vision, then she would get exactly that, right up until the moment she didn't. I spent hours that night exploring options, making phone calls to unusual vendors, asking questions that probably raised eyebrows. But I didn't care anymore. The part of me that cared about being proper and polite and accommodating had finally gone quiet. What emerged in its place was someone I barely recognized, someone who had been pushed too far, someone who was done being invisible. The wedding was 2 weeks away now. 2 weeks to finalize my plans. 2 weeks for Caroline to continue treating me like an afterthought. She had no idea what was coming. How could she? She'd never bothered to learn who I really was beneath the compliant smile and the open wallet. That was going to be her first mistake. But it wouldn't be her last. I closed my laptop as the sun began to rise, feeling more awake than I had in years. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The stage was being set. Caroline wanted perfection. She was about to learn that perfection is just an illusion, and illusions have a way of shattering when you least expect it. The morning of the wedding arrived with clear skies and perfect weather. Of course it did. Caroline had probably ordered it that way. I woke early, took my time getting ready. The navy dress fit well, as invisible as I'd intended. I did my hair simply, applied minimal makeup. Everything about my appearance screamed appropriate and forgettable, just what she wanted. But underneath that carefully constructed exterior, my heart was beating steady and strong. Because today wasn't just about what Caroline wanted anymore. I drove to the venue alone, just as instructed. The building rose up before me like something out of a magazine spread. All glass and modern architecture, perfectly manicured gardens, and a fountain that probably cost more than my car. My money had helped pay for all of this. Every elegant detail, every expensive flourish. The parking lot was already filling with luxury vehicles. I found a spot near the back, taking a moment before I got out. This was it. The day I'd been preparing for. the day everything would change. I grabbed my purse, checked my reflection one last time, and walked toward the entrance. Inside, the venue was even more impressive. Marble floors stretched out endlessly, reflecting the light from massive windows. White roses and orchids adorned every surface, their fragrance filling the air. Everything was pristine, perfect, expensive. Staff members in crisp uniforms directed guests toward the ceremony space. I followed the flow of people, recognizing no one. These were Caroline's friends, Charles's colleagues, people from a world I'd never been invited to join. I spotted Caroline's future mother-in-law near the entrance, holding court with a group of similarly dressed women. Designer handbags, perfect hair, that particular laugh that wealthy people seem to cultivate. She glanced my way briefly, her eyes sliding over me without recognition or interest. I might as well have been part of the furniture. The ceremony space took my breath away, I had to admit. Rows of white chairs faced an elaborate archway covered in more flowers than I'd ever seen in one place. The aisle was lined with candles in glass holders, creating a pathway that looked like something from a dream. An usher approached me. Young, handsome, clearly hired for the aesthetics. "Bride or groom?" he asked with a practiced smile. "Bride," I said. "I'm her mother." Something flickered across his face. "Surprise, maybe." He glanced down at his seating chart, clearly confused. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Let me find your seat." He led me to a chair, not in the front row where mothers typically sit, not even in the second row. Third row, off to the side, partially obscured by one of the massive flower arrangements. "Here you are," he said cheerfully, oblivious to the insult. I thanked him and sat down, smoothing my dress. Around me, guests were chatting, laughing, taking photos of the elaborate setup. I watched them all, these people who fit Caroline's vision of perfection. Not a gray hair out of place, not a simple dress in sight, not a single person who might be considered old or not fitting. More guests arrived. I recognized a few faces from photos Caroline had posted online, her college friends, all looking like they'd stepped off a runway. Charles's groomsmen, confident and polished. Everyone young, attractive, successful. Everyone except me. Music began to play softly. The ceremony was about to start. I watched as Charles took his position at the altar, flanked by his groomsmen. He looked nervous, excited. Did he know what kind of woman he was marrying? Did he see past the beauty and the charm to the cold calculation underneath? Or maybe he was exactly like her. Maybe they deserved each other. The music changed, signaling the start of the processional. Bridesmaids began their walk down the aisle, each one more glamorous than the last. Perfect smiles, perfect posture, perfect everything. Then the doors at the back opened wider, and there she was, Caroline. I had to admit, she looked stunning. Her dress must have cost a fortune. Pure white silk that caught the light, fitted perfectly to her figure, with a train that seemed to go on forever. Her hair was swept up in an intricate style, her makeup flawless. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. She walked slowly, savoring every moment, every eye on her. This was her moment, her day, her triumph. But as she passed my row, she didn't even glance my way. Not a look, not a smile, not an acknowledgement that her mother was sitting there watching her. I might as well have not existed. I felt the familiar sting of rejection, but this time it was different. This time, instead of hurt, I felt something else. Something calm and cold and certain. She reached the altar and took Charles's hands. The officiant began speaking about love and commitment and partnership, words that sounded hollow in this space that was more about appearance than meaning. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, face neutral, while inside I was counting down, waiting, preparing. Caroline thought today was her perfect day, her carefully orchestrated event where everything would go exactly as planned. Where she would be the center of attention, the star of her own show, surrounded by people who matched her aesthetic vision. She thought she had controlled every detail, managed every element, eliminated every potential embarrassment. What she didn't know was that the biggest detail of all was sitting in the third row, wearing a forgettable navy dress, watching and waiting. The ceremony continued. Vows were exchanged, Rings were placed on fingers. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Charles kissed Caroline, and the guests erupted in applause. Everyone stood as the happy couple walked back down the aisle together. Caroline was glowing, radiant with triumph. This was everything she'd wanted, everything she'd worked for, everything she'd been willing to hurt people to achieve. As they passed me, I allowed myself a small smile, just a tiny one, because Caroline had taught me something valuable over these past few weeks. She'd taught me that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes respect matters more. And when respect is gone, when you've been dismissed and diminished and treated like you don't matter, sometimes the only response is to show them exactly what they've lost. The guests began filing out toward the reception space. I stood slowly, taking my time, in no hurry. Let them go ahead. Let them settle in. Let Caroline bask in her moment of glory. Because very soon, that glory was going to dim. And when it did, I wanted to make sure I had a perfect view. The reception hall was even more extravagant than the ceremony space. Round tables draped in silk, centerpieces that looked like small gardens, and a head table positioned on a raised platform so everyone could admire the newlyweds. Of course, I found my assigned seat, naturally at a table near the back with people I'd never met, distant relatives of Charles, judging by their conversation. They nodded politely when I sat down but quickly returned to their own discussions, leaving me in comfortable anonymity, which was exactly where I wanted to be. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per bite than my weekly grocery bill. Classical music played softly in the background. Everything was proceeding exactly as Caroline had planned. Smooth, elegant, perfect. I sipped my water and watched. Caroline and Charles made their grand entrance to enthusiastic applause. They moved to the dance floor for their first dance, spinning and swaying while guests pulled out phones to capture the moment. Caroline's dress caught the light beautifully. Her smile was radiant. She looked like she'd won the lottery. After the dance, they took their seats at the head table. Speeches began. The best man told funny stories about Charles. The maid of honor gushed about how Caroline had always known exactly what she wanted and always got it. That part was certainly true. I checked my watch discreetly. Any moment now. The speeches wrapped up and dinner service began. Multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. The guests were thoroughly enjoying themselves, laughing and toasting and celebrating. Caroline surveyed it all from her throne, looking pleased. Everything was going according to plan. Her plan. Then I saw it. The door at the side of the hall opened, and a staff member entered, pushing something large covered in gold wrapping paper. A gift, by all appearances. An enormous one. The room began to quiet as people noticed. Heads turned. Whispers started. "Oh my goodness, what is that?" someone at my table said. The staff member rolled the large box toward the center of the room, positioning it between the tables and the head table. It was at least 6 feet tall, wrapped beautifully with an oversized bow on top. Caroline's face lit up with curiosity and delight. She loved gifts, loved being the center of attention, loved surprises that made her look special. Charles leaned over to whisper something to her. She shrugged, smiling, clearly pleased by this unexpected addition to her perfect day. The staff member stepped back, and another approached with a microphone. "A special delivery for the bride," he announced. "A gift from someone who loves you very much." Caroline stood up, smoothing her dress, basking in the attention as all eyes turned to her and the mysterious package. She walked down from the platform, her heels clicking on the floor, and approached the box. "Shall we see what's inside?" she called out to the guests, playing to the crowd. Everyone clapped and cheered. Phones were raised, ready to capture whatever surprise awaited. Caroline reached for the bow, tugging at it playfully. The ribbon fell away. She grasped the top of the wrapping paper and pulled. For a moment, nothing happened. The paper fell away, revealing a large wooden crate underneath. Then the latch released. What happened next was beautiful chaos. The first chicken burst out with a squawk that echoed through the elegant hall. Then another, and another. Within seconds, dozens of chickens were exploding from the box in a flurry of feathers and frantic clucking. The room erupted. Guests screamed and jumped back from their tables. Chickens ran in every direction, wings flapping, knocking over centerpieces and scattering across the polished floor. One landed directly on the dessert table, sending a cascade of pastries tumbling. Another flew straight toward the head table, scattering the carefully arranged place settings. Caroline stood frozen, her mouth open in shock, as a particularly large hen ran directly at her. It jumped, talons catching on the delicate fabric of her dress, leaving muddy prints on the pristine white silk. She shrieked, trying to bat it away, but the chicken was determined. It flapped and squawked, tangling itself in her train. More chickens followed, attracted by the commotion, until Caroline was surrounded by a tornado of feathers and noise. Charles tried to help, grabbing at the birds, but they were too quick. One pecked at his hand, and he yelped, pulling back. The guests were in full panic mode now. Women in expensive dresses were climbing onto chairs. Men were trying to shoo the birds away with napkins. The waitstaff looked completely overwhelmed, unsure whether to chase chickens or continue serving dinner. I sat at my table, perfectly still, watching it all unfold. I took a small sip of my water, allowing myself the tiniest smile. Caroline was spinning now, trying to free her dress from the chickens, her perfect hair coming loose from its pins. Her makeup was starting to run with tears of frustration. The beautiful, composed bride had disappeared, replaced by someone frantically fighting off farm animals in front of 200 guests. "Get them off me!" she screamed. "Somebody do something!" Staff members were trying, really they were, but catching chickens in a formal reception hall while wearing tuxedos was proving more difficult than anticipated. Every time they cornered one, 2 more would escape in another direction. A chicken jumped onto the wedding cake, and the entire top tier toppled over, frosting splattering across the floor. Another found its way to the gift table, knocking over carefully wrapped packages. The classical music had stopped. The only sounds now were squawking, screaming, and the frantic scrambling of feet and wings across marble. I watched Caroline's face transform from shock to horror to rage. She was looking around wildly, trying to understand what had happened, how this could have gone so wrong. Her eyes swept the room, landing on various guests, searching for answers. But she didn't look at me. Not yet. She still had no idea. That was fine. I could wait. Because this was just the beginning. After all, I had one more surprise waiting, one that would make the chicken seem like nothing more than an amusing appetizer. The main course was yet to come. It took nearly 20 minutes to wrangle the last of the chickens. By that time, Caroline's dress was ruined, her hair was a disaster, and her composure had completely shattered. She stood in the middle of the hall, shaking with fury, demanding answers that no one could give her. "Who did this?" she kept saying, her voice rising with each repetition. Who would do this? Charles tried to calm her, but she pushed him away. The guests had returned to their seats, murmuring amongst themselves, some barely suppressing laughter. This was not the elegant affair they'd been promised. This was turning into a spectacle. Caroline retreated to the head table, someone draping a shawl over her stained dress. She was trying to salvage what remained of the evening, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. The DJ was attempting to restart the music, to bring back some sense of normalcy. That's when the lights dimmed. The room fell silent. People looked around, confused. Had this been planned? Was this part of the evening's entertainment? The massive screen behind the head table, the one that had been displaying romantic photos of the couple all evening, suddenly flickered to life with something new. A video. And there, filling the screen in crystal clear quality, was Caroline, my daughter, sitting in what looked like a coffee shop, talking to her maid of honor. The audio crackled to life, and Caroline's voice filled the hall. "I mean, I love my mom, but she's just so basic, you know? I can't have her bringing those people to my wedding. Can you imagine Marjorie in her discount store clothes standing next to our guests? It would be mortifying." The room went completely still. You could have heard a pin drop. "On screen," Caroline continued, oblivious to the fact that she was being recorded. "Honestly, the whole thing is exhausting. Managing her expectations, making sure she doesn't embarrass me. Sometimes I wish I could just have the wedding without dealing with any of it." I watched from my table as every head in the room turned toward Caroline. Her face had gone white, then red, then white again. "Turn it off," she whispered. Then louder, "Turn it off." But the video kept playing. Another clip appeared. Caroline on the phone, pacing in her apartment. "James is so easy to handle. I just cry a little, mention how much something means to me, and boom, he writes a check. He thinks he's being supportive, but really, he's just funding the life I deserve." James. That was Charles's father, the one who had helped pay for parts of the wedding. He was sitting 3 tables away from me, his face growing darker with each word. The clips kept coming. Snippets of conversations Caroline had clearly never expected anyone else to hear. Comments about the bridesmaids, dismissive remarks about Charles's family, complaints about how much effort it took to maintain her image. "The whole thing is just performance art," she said in one clip, laughing. "Everyone thinks this is about love, but please, it's about status. Charles has the right last name, the right connections, and I look amazing next to him. That's what matters." The guests were no longer just surprised, they were horrified. I could see it on their faces, the dawning realization that the beautiful bride they'd come to celebrate was not who they thought she was. Caroline was standing now, screaming at the technical staff to shut it down, but they were as confused as everyone else, scrambling with controls that weren't responding. One final clip played, this one more recent, Caroline talking to someone on the phone, probably Charles. "Of course I thanked her for the money. What else was I supposed to do? She lives for this stuff, being needed. It's actually kind of sad. But whatever, at least she's useful." The screen went black. The silence that followed was suffocating. 200 people sitting in stunned disbelief, processing what they'd just witnessed. Caroline's chest was heaving. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining what remained of her makeup. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and humiliation. She spun around, her eyes scanning the crowd, looking for someone to blame. Her gaze landed on the technical booth, then swept across the guests, wild and desperate. "This is fake!" she shouted. "Someone edited those videos. This is sabotage!" But her voice lacked conviction. Everyone had seen her face on that screen, heard her voice. There was no denying it. Charles was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. His parents were whispering furiously to each other. The bridesmaids looked mortified. The guests were gathering their things, ready to leave. The wedding, this perfect event Caroline had spent months planning, was disintegrating before her eyes. And then, finally, her gaze found me. I was sitting calmly at my table, hands folded, expression neutral. Our eyes met across the chaos of the ruined reception hall. I saw the moment recognition dawned, the moment she understood. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She pointed at me, her hand shaking. "You," she managed to say. "You did this." I stood slowly, smoothing my unremarkable navy dress. Every eye in the room turned to me, the forgotten mother, the embarrassing relative, the woman who didn't fit the luxury theme. I walked forward, my heels clicking on the floor, until I stood just a few feet from my daughter. Close enough to see the destruction in her eyes, close enough to smell the fear. "Hello, Caroline," I said softly, calmly. "Are you enjoying your special day?" She took a step back, nearly tripping on her ruined dress. "How could you? I'm your daughter." "Yes," I agreed. "I am your mother, the woman who sacrificed everything for you. The woman who gave you every opportunity. The woman you told not to bring her friends because they weren't good enough for your perfect day." The guests were watching, riveted. This was better than any drama they'd ever seen. Caroline's face crumpled. "Please, Mom, please. We can fix this. We can explain." I smiled then. A real smile. Because we weren't done yet. Not even close. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, my voice carrying across the silent hall. "We're just getting started. You see, there's something else you should know. Something about that apartment you've been so excited to move into after your honeymoon." Her eyes widened. "What about the apartment?" "Well," I said, reaching into my purse, "let me tell you a story about a gift that's no longer yours." I pulled out a folder from my purse. Simple, manila, unremarkable. But the papers inside represented months of planning, years of savings, and one very deliberate decision. "You know what I love about legal documents?" I said conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather. They're so final, so official. Once the ink dries, what's done is done. Caroline's eyes darted to the folder, then back to my face. What are you talking about? The apartment, darling. The beautiful 2-bedroom place in the nice neighborhood with the good schools. The one I spent 5 years saving for. The one I bought as your wedding gift. Her face transformed. Despite everything that had just happened, despite the humiliation and the chaos, I saw hope flicker in her eyes. The apartment. She still thought she had that. Mom, about that, I can explain everything. Those videos, they were taken out of context. I didn't mean any of it. You know I love you. I held up my hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Do you remember what you said to me on the phone 3 weeks ago? You told me not to bring my friends because they didn't fit your luxury theme. You called us old, not fitting, not good enough for your perfect day. I was stressed. Planning a wedding is hard, You meant every word, I said quietly. And I know that because I've been listening to you say things like that for years. I just chose to ignore it. I told myself you were young, that you'd grow out of it, that deep down you still loved me. The guests were absolutely silent, hanging on every word. But you don't, do you? You don't love me. You love what I can give you. The money, the support, the constant yes to every demand. That's what you love. Caroline's face hardened. There it was. The real her. The one that had been hiding behind the tears and the desperation. So what? You're going to punish me because I hurt your feelings? That's pathetic. Several guests gasped. Charles reached for her arm, but she shook him off. You want to know what's pathetic? She continued, her voice rising. Spending your whole life being small and boring and then getting mad when your daughter wants more? I'm not going to apologize for wanting better than your sad little life. I nodded slowly, as if she'd just confirmed something I'd suspected all along. Thank you for that, for being honest, finally. I opened the folder and pulled out the documents inside. These are the transfer papers for the apartment, signed this morning, actually, notarized and filed with the county. Caroline's eyes widened. You're giving me the apartment now? Here? No, sweetheart. I'm showing you where it went. I held up the papers so she could see the letterhead. Homes for Hope, it read, a nonprofit organization that provides housing for struggling families. I transferred the entire property to them. The apartment you were planning to move into, the one you probably already bragged to your friends about, it's going to house a family who actually needs it. A family who will appreciate it. A family that understands the value of sacrifice and gratitude. The color drained from Caroline's face. You can't. That's mine. You promised. I promised nothing. It was going to be a gift. But gifts are given out of love, and they're accepted with grace and gratitude. You've shown neither. She lunged forward, trying to grab the papers from my hands, but Charles caught her, holding her back. She struggled against him, her carefully constructed image completely shattered. That apartment is worth over $300,000. You can't just give it away. I can. And I did. Just like I gave you everything else. Your education, your opportunities, this wedding. The difference is, those other families will actually say thank you. The reality was sinking in now. I could see it in her eyes. Not just the loss of the apartment, but the loss of everything it represented. Security, status, the ability to tell her friends she'd received such an extravagant gift. James, Charles's father, stood up from his table. I think we're done here. He looked at his son. Charles, we're leaving. I suggest you think very carefully about what kind of family you've married into. Other guests started to rise, gathering their belongings. The party was over. Wait, Caroline called out, her voice breaking. Please, this is all a misunderstanding. We can still salvage this. The reception can continue. But they weren't listening. They'd seen enough. The videos, the chickens, the revelation about the apartment. This wasn't the fairy tale wedding they'd come to celebrate. This was a disaster. Caroline turned back to me, desperation replacing anger. Please, Mom, please. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'll change. Just give me the apartment. Please don't do this. Do you know what the hardest part of all this was? I asked, my voice soft but clear enough for everyone still remaining to hear. It wasn't planning the chickens or recording your conversations or transferring the apartment. It was accepting that my daughter, The little girl I raised, the person I loved more than anything, had turned into someone I didn't recognize, someone I didn't particularly like. Her face crumpled, but I wasn't finished. You taught me something valuable, Caroline. You taught me that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes people need consequences. They need to understand that actions have outcomes, that treating people poorly will eventually catch up to them. I put the papers back in my purse and closed it with a decisive snap. Enjoy your marriage, I said. I hope Charles now knows exactly who he married. And I hope you enjoy living in whatever apartment you can afford on your own, without my help. I turned to leave, my back straight, my head high. Behind me, I could hear Caroline's sobs, the murmuring of the remaining guests, the complete destruction of her perfect day. Security was already moving in, I noticed. Someone had called them, probably the venue manager, concerned about the chaos. As I walked toward the exit, I passed tables of abandoned champagne glasses and uneaten food, thousands of dollars of my money, wasted on people who hadn't even stayed for dessert. But somehow, I didn't mind. Because for the first time in years, I felt free. The heavy doors closed behind me, muffling the sounds of Caroline's breakdown. The evening air was cool and refreshing. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in decades. My phone buzzed. A text from Marjorie. Thinking of you today. Hope the wedding is beautiful. I smiled and typed back. It was unforgettable. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls from Caroline. I deleted them without listening to a single voicemail. Then I made myself a cup of coffee, sat on my porch, and watched the sunrise. It was peaceful. Quiet. Mine. By noon, the calls had increased to 30. Text messages flooded in, each more desperate than the last. I'm sorry. Please answer. We need to talk. Mom, please. I made a mistake. I blocked her number. What I didn't block was social media. Not because I was on it much myself, but because Marjorie called that afternoon, her voice breathless with shock. Have you seen what people are posting? She asked. I hadn't, but I could imagine. Tell me. Videos. Dozens of them. Guests recorded everything. The chickens, the screen, your speech. It's everywhere. People are calling it the wedding disaster of the year. I sipped my coffee, considering this. How unfortunate. There's more? Marjorie continued. Someone posted the audio clips that played at the reception, the ones of Caroline. People are sharing them, commenting. She's getting torn apart online. A small part of me, the part that had loved Caroline since she was born, felt a twinge, but it was small, very small, and it was drowned out by something larger, something that felt suspiciously like justice. She did that to herself, I said. I know, but it's brutal out there. One of the videos has over 1 million views already. After we hung up, I did look. Just once, just to see. Marjorie hadn't exaggerated. The videos were everywhere. Hashtags had formed. Wedding disaster. Karma. Entitled bride. The comments ranged from gleeful to horrified to supportive of what I'd done. She had it coming, one person wrote. Imagine treating your mother like that, said another. That mom is a legend, a third commented. I closed the app. I didn't need the validation of strangers, though I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel vindicating. The calls started coming from other people too. Caroline's friends, trying to mediate. Charles, attempting to smooth things over. Even James called once, though his message was surprisingly supportive. What Caroline said about me on those recordings was illuminating, his voicemail said. You did the right thing. She needed to learn this lesson. I didn't return any of the calls. There was nothing left to say. 3 days after the wedding, a letter arrived. Hand-delivered. Caroline's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won out. The letter was long. Pages and pages of explanations and justifications and apologies that felt rehearsed. She was sorry. She had been stressed. She didn't mean any of it. She loved me. She needed me. Please forgive her. At the bottom, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned that she and Charles were struggling financially. The wedding had been expensive. They'd counted on the apartment to save money while they got established. Without it, things were difficult. There it was. The real reason for the letter. Not genuine remorse, not true understanding of what she'd done. Just need, just want, just the same old Caroline, looking for someone to solve her problems. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, unanswered. The following week, I saw her. Not intentionally. I was at the grocery store, and there she was in the produce section, looking thinner and more worn than I'd ever seen her. Our eyes met across the display of apples. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she started walking toward me. I picked up my basket and walked the other direction. I heard her call out, "Mom, please," but I didn't turn around. I finished my shopping quickly and left. That night, she showed up at my house. I watched from the window as she knocked on the door, rang the bell, knocked again. She stood there for 15 minutes, waiting for me to answer. I sat in my armchair, reading a book, and didn't move. Eventually, she left. Marjorie came over for tea a few days later. We sat in my kitchen, the afternoon light streaming through the windows, and she told me what she'd heard through the rumor mill. Caroline had been let go from her job. The videos had reached her employer, and they'd decided her behavior didn't align with their company values. Charles's family had distanced themselves, embarrassed by the association. The couple had been forced to move into a small rental apartment, nothing like the place I'd given away. "People are saying she's having a breakdown," Marjorie said carefully, watching my face. "Are you okay?" Was I okay? I thought about that question, really thought about it. "I'm better than I've been in years," I said honestly. Marjorie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Good. You deserve peace." Peace. That's exactly what it was. The constant anxiety about Caroline's approval, the endless cycle of giving and never receiving appreciation, the weight of always making myself smaller so she could feel bigger, all of it was gone. In its place was something simpler, something lighter, my life. I started doing things I'd put off for years. I signed up for a painting class. I planned that trip to Italy I'd postponed. I spent time with friends who actually valued me. I invested in myself instead of constantly depleting myself for someone who'd never truly seen me. Caroline kept trying. Letters, messages through mutual acquaintances. Once, she even sent flowers with a card that said, "I'm sorry, please give me another chance." I donated the flowers to a nursing home. Because here's what I'd learned. Some bridges, once burned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. Some relationships, once broken, aren't worth repairing. And some people need to face the consequences of their actions without a safety net, without someone rushing in to save them from themselves. Caroline had spent years learning that I would always be there, always forgive, always help. She'd learned wrong. Now she was learning something new, that actions have weight, that cruelty leaves scars, that you can't treat people as disposable and expect them to keep showing up. It was a hard lesson, but it was necessary. And as for me, I was finally learning something too, that my worth wasn't tied to how much I could give, that setting boundaries wasn't cruel, that walking away from toxicity wasn't abandonment. It was survival. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I no longer needed her approval or her love. I no longer defined myself by my role as her mother. I was just me, and that was enough. 6 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mom?" Caroline's voice was small, broken, nothing like the confident tone she'd used to tell me not to bring my friends. I said nothing. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me," she continued, words tumbling out fast, like she was afraid I'd hang up. "But I need you to hear me out. Please, just 5 minutes." I walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the garden I'd been tending. New flowers, new growth, a fresh start. "I'm listening," I said finally. She exhaled, a sound somewhere between relief and desperation. "I've been thinking about everything, about what I said, what I did, and you're right. I was horrible. I was selfish and cruel, and I took you for granted." The words sounded rehearsed. Practiced in front of a mirror, maybe, or workshopped with a therapist. "Go on," I said. I don't know what I was thinking. The wedding planning just consumed me. I got so caught up in making everything look perfect that I forgot what actually mattered. I forgot about the people who loved me. I forgot about you. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, waiting for me to respond, to reassure her, to tell her it was okay. I didn't. Things have been really hard since the wedding, she continued, her voice cracking. I lost my job. Did you hear? They said my behavior was unprofessional. Charles's family barely speaks to us. We're living in this tiny apartment that's nothing like what we planned. And everywhere I go, people recognize me from those videos. They stare. They whisper. Still, I said nothing. I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But Mom, I'm drowning here. I need help. I need my mother. There it was, the real reason for the call, not genuine remorse, not true understanding, just need. What exactly do you want from me, Caroline? I asked, my voice calm. I need support. Financial support, honestly. Just until we get back on our feet. Charles is looking for a new job, but it's taking time. His parents cut him off after the wedding. We're behind on rent. We can't afford groceries half the time. If you could just help us with a few months' rent, maybe some money for food, we could. No. The word hung in the air between us. What? I said no. But Mom, I'm your daughter. You can't just abandon me when I need you most. I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound surprised even me. Is that what you think this is? Abandonment? Yes. You left me at my wedding. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. You gave away an apartment that was supposed to be mine. And now you won't even help me when I'm struggling? Caroline, do you hear yourself? Even now, even after everything, you still think you're entitled to my help. You still think I owe you something. You're my mother, and you're my daughter. But being family doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean letting you treat me like an ATM with no feelings. I apologized. Did you? Because what I heard just now wasn't an apology. It was an explanation for why you treated me badly, followed by a request for money. That's not remorse. That's strategy. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, harder, more like the Caroline from those recordings. So that's it? You're just gonna let me suffer? Let your only daughter struggle because you got your feelings hurt? My feelings didn't get hurt, Caroline. My eyes got opened. There's a difference. This is ridiculous. I made a mistake. One mistake. And you're going to punish me forever? It wasn't one mistake. It was years of taking me for granted. Years of treating me like I existed solely to serve you. The wedding was just the moment I finally saw it clearly. I can't believe you're being this selfish. And there it was. The real Caroline, emerging now that the performance hadn't worked. I was selfish for not giving her money. Selfish for having boundaries. Selfish for refusing to continue being used. You want to know what's really sad? I said quietly. You called me because you need something, not because you miss me, not because you've genuinely reflected on your behavior, but because you need money. If you'd won the lottery last week, would you have called at all? Silence. That's what I thought. Mom, please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll be better. I'll prove it to you. Just please, help me this one time. No, Caroline, you need to figure this out on your own. You need to learn that actions have consequences, that people aren't infinite resources to be tapped whenever convenient. I hate you. The words should have stung. Once upon a time, they would have devastated me. But now? Now they just sounded empty, like a child throwing a tantrum. You don't hate me, I said. You hate that I'm not doing what you want. There's a difference. If you don't help me, I'll never forgive you. You'll never see me again. You'll never meet your grandchildren. Threats now. The final tool in her arsenal. If I never hear from you again unless I pay for the privilege, then we didn't have a real relationship anyway. We had a transaction. And Caroline, I'm done making transactions that only benefit you. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. I hung up before she could respond. My hand was steady as I set the phone down. My heart was calm, because somewhere in that conversation, I'd heard the truth that I'd been avoiding for years. Caroline didn't love me. She loved what I could provide, and when I stopped providing, the love disappeared like smoke. That wasn't my daughter speaking. That was a stranger who happened to share my blood, and I didn't owe strangers my savings, my peace, or my life. The phone rang again immediately. The same unknown number. I declined the call and blocked it. Then I made myself dinner, something I actually enjoyed instead of something quick between obligations. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, in a house that felt more like home than it had in years. Caroline would have to save herself this time. And maybe, just maybe, that would be the best thing that ever happened to her. Or maybe it wouldn't. Either way, it was no longer my problem to solve. 3 months passed. Autumn arrived, bringing cooler weather and changing leaves. I enrolled in that painting class I'd been thinking about. Terrible at it, honestly, but I enjoyed trying. That was the point. Marjorie and I took a weekend trip to the coast. We walked on the beach, ate fresh seafood, and laughed about nothing in particular. It was glorious. I didn't think about Caroline much anymore. When I did, it was with a strange detachment, like remembering someone from a past life. Then one afternoon, I received an email from Charles, of all people. The subject line read, "About Caroline." I almost deleted it, but something made me open it instead. "Mrs. Patterson," it began formally. "I know you and Caroline aren't speaking, and I respect your boundaries, but I thought you should know what's happening. Caroline has been struggling significantly. The job loss hit her harder than she let on. She's applied to dozens of positions but keeps getting rejected. I think employers are finding the videos online. Her social media presence has made her unhireable in her field. Our marriage is strained. My parents won't help us financially, and we're barely making rent each month. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I just thought you should know. Charles." I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Part of me felt sympathy. A small part. The maternal instinct that never fully disappears, no matter how much someone hurts you. But the larger part, the part that had finally learned to protect itself, felt nothing but certainty. This was not my problem to solve. 2 weeks later, Caroline showed up at my painting class. I saw her through the window before she entered. She looked different. Thinner, yes, but also somehow diminished, like someone had turned down her brightness. She waited outside until the class ended, then approached me as I packed up my supplies. "Mom." I continued packing, not looking at her. "Caroline, can we talk, please?" The other students were filing out, glancing at us with curiosity. I didn't want a scene. "Walk with me," I said. We walked to a nearby park in silence, found a bench away from the playground where children were shrieking with laughter. "I'm not here to ask for money," Caroline said immediately. Good, because the answer would be no. She flinched but continued, "I'm here to ask for something different. A job. At your company." I turned to look at her fully for the first time. "Excuse me? I know you're on the board at the community center. I know they're hiring for the events coordinator position. I saw the posting online. I'm qualified. More than qualified, actually. I have experience in planning and coordination. I just need someone to vouch for me, to get past the background check issues." Background check issues, a polite way of saying her internet infamy had made her unemployable. "You want me to use my position to get you a job? I want you to give me a chance to prove I've changed, to show you I can be better. I've been thinking about everything, about what you said, and you were right. I was terrible to you. But I can't move forward if no one will hire me. I need this, Mom. Please." I studied her face, looking for genuine remorse, for real understanding, for any sign that this was about more than desperation. I saw calculation, strategy, a performance designed to get what she needed. "No," I said. "You didn't even think about it. I don't need to think about it." The answer is no. "Why? You're on the board. You could make one phone call. That's all it would take." "Caroline, you don't want that job because you've had some great revelation about community service. You want it because you're desperate and you think I'm your easiest path forward. That's not true, isn't it? If another job had come through, would you be here right now? Would you have sought me out to apologize and rebuild our relationship? Or would I still be blocked out of your life until you needed something else?" She looked away, jaw tight. "That's what I thought," I said. "I am sorry. I know you don't believe me, but I am. I see now what I did, how I treated you. It was wrong. Do you know why it was wrong? Because I hurt you." "No." "Well, yes, but that's not the core of it. It was wrong because you treated me like I wasn't a person, like I was a resource to be managed, a problem to be handled, an ATM with no feelings or needs of my own. And even now, sitting here telling me you've changed, you're still doing it. I'm not. You are. You're not here because you miss me. You're here because you need something. Again, still, always. And you think if you say the right words, perform the right amount of contrition, I'll give it to you. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. Real ones this time, I thought, but tears of frustration, not understanding. I don't know what else to do, she whispered. I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, my relationship with Charles's family. I have nothing left. Then build something new, on your own, without using me as your foundation. How? How am I supposed to do that when no one will give me a chance? The same way millions of people do it every day. You start small, you work hard, you prove yourself through actions, not words. You accept that you created this situation and you're the only one who can fix it. She stood up abruptly. You know what? I don't need this. I don't need your judgment or your lectures. I came here willing to humble myself, to beg if I had to, and you can't even help your own daughter. Helping you now would be hurting you. Can't you see that? Every time I've rescued you from consequences, I've taught you that your actions don't matter. That someone will always be there to clean up your messes. So this is for my own good? Is that what you're telling yourself? This is for both our good. You need to learn self-sufficiency, and I need to stop enabling your dependence. She laughed bitterly. Enabling? That's rich. You gave away my apartment out of spite, humiliated me at my wedding, and now you won't lift a finger to help me rebuild. But sure, you're doing this for my benefit. Believe whatever you need to believe, Caroline. But my answer remains no. I won't use my position to get you that job. I won't be your safety net anymore. You're on your own. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. The realization, perhaps, that I truly meant it. That no amount of tears or anger or manipulation would change my mind. I hope you can live with yourself, she said coldly. I'm living better than I have in years. She turned and walked away, her footsteps sharp against the pavement. I watched her go, waiting for the guilt to hit, for the maternal instinct to kick in and make me call her back. It never came. Instead, I felt lighter, clearer, like I'd finally put down a weight I'd been carrying for decades. I sat on that bench for a while longer, watching the children play, listening to their uncomplicated joy. Somewhere out there, Caroline was probably calling someone else, looking for another person to solve her problems. But it wouldn't be me. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever again. Winter came quietly. The first snow fell on a Tuesday morning, covering everything in a clean, white blanket. I stood at my window with coffee in hand, watching the world transform into something new. I'd always loved winter. The stillness of it, the way it forced everything to slow down and rest. That's what I was doing now. Resting. Really resting, for the first time in decades. The Italy trip happened in November. I spent 2 glorious weeks wandering through ancient streets, eating pasta that tasted like sunshine, and standing in front of art that made me cry for reasons I couldn't explain. I went alone, and it was perfect. In Rome, I met a woman named Barbara from Australia. We got lost together trying to find the Pantheon, ended up at a tiny restaurant that wasn't in any guidebook, and laughed until our sides hurt. We still email each other every few weeks. I never would have met her if I'd kept putting everyone else first, if I'd kept making myself small and manageable and convenient. The painting class progressed. I wasn't getting much better, but I didn't care. Mrs. Doreen, the instructor, said I had an interesting perspective. I think she meant my paintings looked nothing like what I was supposed to be painting, but I took it as a compliment anyway. Marjorie and I started a book club. Just the 2 of us at first. Then we invited a few other women from the community center. We met every other Thursday, drank wine, and talked about everything except the books. It was exactly what I needed. My house felt different now. Lighter. I'd redecorated Caroline's old room, turning it into a reading space with a comfortable chair and shelves for all the books I'd never had time to read. The photos of her childhood stayed in albums now, not displayed on every surface like shrines to a relationship that no longer existed. I'd learned something important during these months of silence. Something I wished I'd understood years ago. Sacrifice is only noble if it's appreciated. If it's expected, demanded, taken for granted, then it's not sacrifice. It's just slowly erasing yourself for someone who doesn't notice. I'd spent Caroline's entire life erasing myself, making myself smaller so she could be bigger, quieter so she could be louder, less so she could be more. And for what? So she could grow up thinking that's how relationships work? That some people exist to serve while others exist to take? I'd done her no favors by teaching her that lesson. And I'd done myself even less. One afternoon, I volunteered at Homes for Hope, the organization that now owned the apartment I'd transferred. They were having an open house for potential families, and I wanted to see where my years of savings had gone. The apartment looked beautiful. They'd furnished it simply but warmly. A young woman named Teresa walked through with her 2 children, their eyes wide with hope. 3 bedrooms? She whispered to the coordinator like she couldn't believe it. 3 bedrooms, the coordinator confirmed. And the rent is subsidized based on your income. You'd be able to afford it. Teresa started crying. Her daughter, maybe 7 years old, tugged her hand. Does this mean we don't have to live in the car anymore, Mama? I had to step outside, not because I was sad, but because my chest felt too full. That apartment had been meant for Caroline, for someone who would have looked at it and found something to criticize, the wrong neighborhood, not quite trendy enough, smaller than she'd hoped. Instead, it was going to house this family. These people who understood the value of a safe place to sleep, who would appreciate every square foot. I'd made the right choice. I knew that now, with absolute certainty. The coordinator found me outside. Are you all right? I'm better than all right, I said, wiping my eyes. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She smiled. You know, the donor who gave us this property changed 3 lives. That's not small. 3 lives. Versus 1 person who wouldn't have valued it anyway. The math was simple. As weeks turned into months, people occasionally asked about Caroline. At the community center, at church, at the grocery store. How's your daughter? Is she married now? Do you have grandchildren yet? At first, I'd fumbled through explanations. We're not in touch. We're taking some space. It's complicated. But eventually, I settled on the truth. We don't have a relationship currently, and I'm okay with that. Some people looked shocked. Others nodded knowingly, like they'd had similar experiences with their own children. One woman squeezed my hand and said, "Good for you. Not enough mothers know when to let go." Letting go. That's what I'd done, wasn't it? Not out of anger or spite, but out of necessity, out of self-preservation. I'd let go of the daughter I'd imagined Caroline could be and accepted the person she actually was. And once I did that, once I stopped trying to force a relationship that only worked when I was giving and she was taking, everything became clearer. I wasn't angry anymore. That was the surprising part. I'd expected to carry rage and hurt for years, but instead, I felt calm, settled, at peace with decisions that had once seemed impossible. Setting boundaries wasn't cruel, walking away from toxicity wasn't abandonment, protecting my own well-being wasn't selfish. These were the lessons I'd learned too late to apply to raising Caroline, but not too late to apply to the rest of my life. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. Stopped volunteering for every committee that needed help. Quit showing up to events out of obligation rather than genuine interest. And you know what happened? The world didn't end. People weren't angry. Most of them didn't even notice. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. When you're the person who always says yes, who always helps, who always sacrifices, people don't actually value you more. They just expect more. And expectations without appreciation are just weight you don't need to carry. I was 72 years old, and I was finally learning how to live for myself. It should have happened decades ago, but better late than never, as they say. The snow kept falling outside my window. Tomorrow I'd shovel the walk, maybe invite Marjorie over for lunch, continue reading that mystery novel I'd started. Simple things, peaceful things, mine. Caroline was somewhere out there, living her life, dealing with her consequences. And for the first time in her entire existence, I wasn't wondering how to fix things for her. She was on her own, and so was I. The difference was, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth. The garden I'd been tending through winter began to bloom, splashes of color emerging from the thawed earth. I'd planted tulips, daffodils, and some wildflowers I'd never tried before. They were thriving. Funny how things grow better when you actually pay attention to them, when you give them what they need instead of what's left over after everyone else has taken their share. I was sitting on my porch one Saturday morning, coffee in hand, when a car pulled up. Not Caroline's, a modest sedan I didn't recognize. Charles stepped out. I set down my coffee, surprised but not alarmed. He looked different from the polished groom I'd seen at the wedding. More real, more worn, but in a way that suggested growth rather than defeat. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, approaching cautiously. "I hope I'm not intruding. I know you value your boundaries." "You can call me Helen," I said. "What brings you here?" He sat in the chair across from me, the one Marjorie usually occupied during our morning visits. "I wanted to update you, and to thank you." "Thank me?" "For the wake-up call. Both of us needed it. I just didn't realize it at the time." I waited for him to continue. "Caroline and I are divorcing," he said simply. "It's amicable, or as amicable as these things can be. We both realized we'd built our relationship on image rather than substance. When the image shattered, there wasn't much left underneath." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. Not sorry for the divorce itself, but sorry that two people had wasted time on something hollow. "Don't be. It's the best thing for both of us. I've moved back home, working with my father's company, taking time to figure out who I actually am instead of who I thought I should be." He paused. "Caroline is doing the same, in her own way." "How is she?" The question surprised me as much as it probably surprised him. I didn't need to know, didn't owe her my concern, but some small part of me, that stubborn maternal instinct, still wondered. "She's working," Charles said. "Nothing glamorous. She's waiting tables at a diner downtown, living with a roommate. It's been humbling for her. But I think she's starting to understand what you were trying to teach her." "Starting to understand isn't the same as understanding." "No," he agreed. "But it's something. She asked me not to tell you where she is or what she's doing. She's embarrassed, I think. Ashamed." "Good," I thought, but didn't say. Shame was useful when it led to growth, toxic when it led to blame. "I'm not here to plead her case," Charles continued. "I just thought you deserved to know she's alive and she's trying. Whether that matters to you or not is entirely your decision." "It doesn't," I said gently. "Not because I wish her harm, but because her journey isn't mine to manage anymore. If she becomes someone different, someone better, that's wonderful. But it's not my responsibility to witness or validate it." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for. At the wedding, I thought you were being vindictive, but you were just protecting yourself." "Those two things aren't mutually exclusive," I said with a slight smile. "But yes, I was protecting myself, finally." We talked for a few more minutes. He told me about his plans, his hopes for a different kind of life than the one he'd been pursuing. I wished him well, and I meant it. After he left, I sat on my porch a while longer, thinking about Caroline, waiting tables, living with a roommate, building a life from scratch. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction. See? Consequences, justice, karma. But mostly I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not sadness, not anger, just a quiet neutrality that came from genuine disengagement. Her story was no longer my story. We'd split into separate narratives, and I was okay with that. That afternoon, I drove to Homes for Hope again. Teresa and her children had moved into the apartment, and they'd invited volunteers to a celebration dinner. The apartment smelled like garlic and home cooking. The children's artwork covered the refrigerator. Teresa had planted herbs in pots on the windowsill. "This place saved us," she told me, not knowing I was the donor. "I can't believe someone just gave this away. Like an angel." Not an angel. Just a woman who'd finally figured out where her resources belonged. Driving home, I thought about revenge. That's what this whole story started as, wasn't it? Revenge against a daughter who dismissed and humiliated me. But somewhere along the way, it had transformed into something else, something bigger, liberation. I hadn't just gotten revenge on Caroline. I'd freed myself from a pattern that had defined my entire life, the pattern of giving until empty, of loving without reciprocation. of making myself small so others could feel large. The chickens, the videos, the apartment transfer. They weren't just about punishing Caroline. They were about declaring that I mattered too, that my feelings, my dignity, my life had value. And you know what? That realization was worth more than any apology Caroline could ever give me. So if you're listening to this story and you see yourself in it, if you recognize that pattern of giving and giving to people who only take, let me tell you something important. You deserve better. You deserve to be valued, appreciated, respected. And if the people in your life can't offer that, you deserve the strength to walk away. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Protecting your peace isn't cruel. Letting people face their own consequences isn't abandonment. It's survival. It's self-love. It's choosing yourself after years of choosing everyone else. I'm 72 years old, and I'm happier now than I've been in decades. Not because I got revenge, though that had its satisfying moments, but because I finally learned that my life is mine to live. Not for my children, not for obligation, not for anyone's approval but my own. If you got something from this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your own experiences, your own moments of standing up for yourself. And if you haven't already, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about finding strength when you didn't know you had it. Because here's the truth I've learned. It's never too late to choose yourself. Never too late to set boundaries. Never too late to build the life you actually want, instead of the one everyone else expects. Caroline taught me that lesson, even if she didn't mean to. And for that, I suppose I should thank her. But I won't, because I'm done giving her credit for changes I made myself. This is my story now. My life, my peace, and it's absolutely beautiful.